Bonjour! Welcome to this new episode of So French, a podcast about the twists and turns, intrigues and insights to all things French.
Every 2 weeks we select the best, most interesting and fascinating of French news stories, all brought to you from our studio in the heart of Paris.
And this week it's all about elections and some scandals as well. And we have a special segment. We talk about France's large and diverse Asian population. And of course, Mo Descamps brings us a fresh French word of the day. But first,
yeah. It's even difficult to know where to start.
Yeah, it's such an incredible week again in French politics.
But I think we need to start with François Fillon, the Conservative Party's candidate for the elections. We have talked about this before. He has been hunted by this fake job scandal, according to which he has hired his wife and children for public money, but without them actually doing any proper work.
Yeah, especially his wife.
Especially his wife.
For years.
It goes under the name of Penelope Gate here in France. And let's just take a listen to what happened earlier this week.
Mesdames et messieurs, mon avocat a été informé que je serai convoqué le 15 mars par les juges d'instruction afin d'être mis en examen. Je ne me rendrai pas. J'irai jusqu'au bout parce qu'au-delà de ma personne, c'est la démocratie qui est défiée.
So that was François Fillon earlier this week. What did he say?
Well, there he says, I will be, on the 15th of March, put under formal investigation in this case, but I will still stand in the presidential election. And this, for those who remember, actually goes completely against everything that he has said up until now. He has said that he would step down only and only if he was put under formal investigation.
Yeah, which has happened now.
Well, will happen.
It will happen, yeah. And he still stays on.
How is this possible, Stefan?
Yeah, it's incredible. He's really, he's probably the only person in France who still thinks he has a chance to become the president of this country. Basically his defense is to attack everybody who says he has done something wrong. So the judges, the media, other politicians, maybe even the Élysée, François Hollande. It's all, of course, a conspiracy against him, and he doesn't really seem to realize that how many people are really shocked by his behavior.
It's also a way of a rhetoric that we normally see. Well, we have seen it by Donald Trump in the US.
Absolutely.
We've seen it also by dictators in quite countries that we might not want to be linked to. But this way for François Hollande of saying that, using his position to get out of a personal situation, which actually this involves his personal life, and using his position as a politician and this platform of press conferences and his power and status as a top politician.
And it's also a form of arrogance because he gave the press conference and it was supposed to start at noon, and he only showed up a half an hour later. And then it basically was a statement of 8 minutes, and there were no questions. So I really don't understand why the press is still showing up at these meetings. But and he's really convinced about the fact that he did nothing wrong. And he also says, well, what I've done, everybody does it, so what's the problem? And he doesn't seem to realize that the times have changed. He's a politician since 1981. And this kind of behavior simply doesn't work anymore in 2017, but he doesn't see it.
Let's take a listen again, another snippet of what he actually said in this press conference.
C'est un assassinat en effet, mais par ce déchaînement disproportionné, sans précédent connu, par le choix de ce calendrier.
Yeah, here he said he talks about a political assassination, which are really harsh words, of course. He accuses the judges, the press, and it's a dangerous rhetoric. Indeed, it reminds us of Donald Trump, a little bit of Marine Le Pen as well, but also of other extreme right or populist leaders in Europe. Of course, he has done nothing wrong. It's the system that's against him.
And it's interesting to just say that he has he was Mr. Clean. He sold himself
that's
as
the whole point.
Mr. Clean candidate who had never, during his 30 years of political career, been in any scandal. He was going to make a difference, according to what he said was a sometimes corrupt system, and other candidates, especially blaming Sarkozy for his legal issues. So it's quite a fascinating story. It's at the same time sad, I think, sad thing to see, because this is a man who is he's just falling in front of our eyes, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also bad for democracy in general and for France, because it gives a very bad image of the politicians, which is already pretty bad.
But don't you I'm not quite agreeing with you on this one, because I think that this actually shows that democracy and transparency is moving forward in France, because this, as he rightly says, is nothing new. French politicians have been hiring their family, taking advantages of the system for decades and centuries. And now, suddenly, this is no longer okay.
Yeah.
That the system is reacting to it, that media is reacting to it, that French people is reacting to it. For me, it's actually something good.
Actually, I agree with that. It's a completely... if this would have happened like 10 or 15 years ago, then people would have, said, okay, well, it's France. And that doesn't longer...
It wouldn't even have made a big thing in the media, I think.
Yeah, no, and of course, what's interesting as well is that within his own party, his supporters are going every hour. There are more people leaving him behind. There's even a counter on the website, Libération, of the newspaper.
A real-time counter.
A real-time counter of all the people that dropped their support. And as we are taping this show Friday afternoon, it's on 75. But yesterday morning it was on 5. So
and these are heavy weights actually leaving.
Yeah.
He only today, this end of the week, lost very heavyweight supporters. This morning, Friday morning, he lost his spokesperson.
Yeah, his spokesperson Thierry Soler, who was a very, very loyal supporter of François Fillon. He's the one who organized the primaries as well. And so if even he steps down, it shows that it's. Can
we just talk a little bit about his tweet, because that sort of he announced he announced his that he was withdrawing from this. He was in charge of organizing the primaries on the right wing, but he says in his tweet, as the organizer of the primaries, I withdraw. I stepped down from my duties as a spokesperson for François Fillon. What does this mean? Does this mean that he's actually going to go look for another candidate?
Well, yeah, you could interpret this that there will be maybe a new primary, but they have to be really, really quickly, because the deadline for the candidacies is the 16th of March.
They need to move quickly.
10 days. But the problem is that the statutes of the party only allow a candidate when he has been elected by a primary election. There's no plan B, as they call it here. There's no alternative. So if another candidate wants to step in, well, theoretically they should organize a new primary election, which seems to me logistically almost impossible. But that's the only way they can do it. And if Fillon steps down in the next couple of days, it will be very tough to get another candidate. So they're in trouble.
But if he steps down himself, maybe they could say that the number two,
which is Alain Juppé, the former prime minister. Yeah, they could, but they did not foresee this.
No one expected this.
No one expected this.
They all expected he was going to be the president.
Absolutely.
I mean, in November, this was a done deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredible how they can screw up and just lose the election that was, everybody thought they were going to win only 2 months ago. Now, François Fillon is not the only one in trouble with the legal forces. There's another person, Marine Le Pen. She is actually involved.
She hasn't been out, criticizing
not
Fillon
really,
very much on this particular issue, I must say.
And there's a reason for that, because she's involved in a kind of similar scandal, because she allegedly employed 20 parliamentary assistants in the European Parliament. so paid by the European taxpayer, and they've not been working for her at the European Parliament, but at the maybe at the headquarters of the Front National, which is forbidden. She has refused to go to police questioning in this case, but there is another case where she has to show up to the police, and that's the case where she tweeted horrible images about 1.5 years ago of propaganda images of the Islamic State. The European Parliament waived her parliamentary immunity because she's a member of the European Parliament, so she will have to answer the questions of the French police in this very particular case. She tweeted photos, and half a day later she already took them off the web.
It was criticized by us. This was actually victims of the Islamic State group.
Yeah.
Their families.
Yeah,
they were upset because she was using their dead relatives in a political purpose.
Yeah, and of course Marine Le Pen says that she used the images to show the horrible acts of IS. But there's a law in France that forbids the distribution of violent images. She's now under investigation of this act, so we'll see what will lead to that.
It is interesting, though, to see how the rhetoric used by Marine Le Pen in this case and the similarities with François Fillon, because for a long time, or at least a couple of months before these scandals broke, François Fillon was seen as the person who was going to be able to stand up against Marine Le Pen. And now we're seeing both of them using the same rhetoric, the
Absolutely.
same accusations against the media, against the justice system,
Yeah.
portraying themselves as the victims, and they suddenly end up looking very much the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting as well is that they're both defenders of a very severe legal system with harsh punishment and zero tolerance. And
for others.
For others, yeah, as they say in French, do as I say, but don't do as I do. And then the third man, he's doing pretty well, actually.
Well, the thing is, because we finally have it, right? We have it. We have the program. The political program of
Emmanuel Macron.
Exactly.
Yeah, the third man, the independent candidate who's doing really, really well in the polls. Merci Fillon, he will probably say. But he's gaining momentum. And for a very long time, there was a lot of criticism because this man, he's running for president without a program. But this week in Paris, he presented his program.
Small detail, it was at exactly the same moment as François Fillon was holding his press conference.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of the things he said.
La France est un pays irréformable. Mais nous ne proposons pas de le réformer. Nous proposons une transformation complète, radicale.
So that was Emmanuel Macron. He basically said that we cannot reform this country, and I think he's right. And therefore, we need a radical transformation. So that's
a new French revolution. Is this what you're telling me? That it's going to be a new revolution?
I hope so. It would be time. But if you look at his program, it is interesting, I have to admit. At least it's optimistic. And I think that's... In France.
And it's a very open program. It's a very open towards Europe, open towards the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting to say that he who is by some criticized for being the continuation of the politics of Hollande. He was his economy minister after all. He has a very social democratic, almost, or some maybe more liberal, but still some social democratic ideas. And still, it's him coming out then, as you say, as someone, as a revolutionary.
Yeah, it is. It is strange, but that shows how very fixed the system is and how difficult it is to really be really different. What's also interesting about the fact is that he's, of course, independent. He has his own movement, En Marche, but it's not a political party in the traditional sense. And the last couple of days... he's getting more and more support from disappointed socialists, but also disappointed people at the Conservative Party. The center candidate, the traditional center candidate, François Bayrou, also supported him. So he's attracting people from all kinds of political colors, which could be an advantage, but it could also be a disadvantage.
But he's got a lot of support, but the question is, of course, how is he going to implement his program? Because, as you said, he doesn't have a political party and he doesn't have a group in parliament. So how, that is, I think, one of the biggest issues. How is he going to manage that situation if he would be elected the president?
Yes, indeed. That's, of course, the question, because after the presidential election in June, there's a general election for the lower house, and he will really need people in the parliament in order to get all his propositions passed. That's going to be difficult. He he asked for the French people to apply to become a candidate. He received about 10,000 reactions, people who have never been a politician before. That's also very interesting. And 30% of those 10,000 are women. And that's one of his strong points. Emmanuel Macron really wants 50% of the candidates to be either a woman or a man, but at least he wants really 50-50. And so he's really fighting for that, which I think is already positive if you look at the current House of Parliament in France.
Which is a pretty sad situation.
Yeah,
to be,
even Rwanda and Afghanistan, they have more women in the parliament than France. But
still, let's say even if he does create his party, and even if he does create, I mean, he will still have to more or less negotiate every single bill in parliament to get it through, and that will be a major challenge, because we do know politicians, and we do know, I mean, negotiating with a group, a parliamentary group, is one thing, but he will have to go, if I understand this correctly, with each and every person, actually. Yeah,
he has to find a majority on every topic, so he will have to negotiate. And now, to us, Sweden and the Netherlands, it's very common to negotiate a compromise. But that's not tradition in France, so it's going to be really difficult. It's new. It's a small revolution in French politics. It could work. I looked it up. If he is elected, he will be the youngest leader France has ever known since Napoleon I. Napoleon was...
Is that a good comparison?
I don't know, but it's two centuries ago. So, you can imagine it's sort of a revolution. 39 years old, and maybe France's next president.
We have just gone from the year of the ape to enter the year of the rooster. The Chinese New Year has been celebrated across France and the world, especially though in Paris. We've seen it all across the different Asian neighborhoods in the city. My neighborhood was filled with red lanterns, and there are been parades in several parts of the city as well. And Paris actually has more than one Chinatown, which is quite rare for a city. There is the biggest Chinatown, which is in the 13th arrondissement, which is just down the street from here, actually, where we are. And then you have the Arts-et-Métiers Chinatown, which is the oldest Chinatown in Paris. And then you have the Belleville, which is in the east of the city, which is the one with the biggest Chinese population, actually. But so today we're going to explore a little bit more of this, and we're together with Leo Takuchi, who is joining us for this edition. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for accepting me.
You are Secretary General of Asia 2.0. Can you just briefly tell us what is Asia 2.0?
Asia 2.0 is association, a French association, which goal is to fight against racism aimed at the Asian communities. We have decided to fight against racism not as a global issue, but first to point out that the racism against the Asian communities was a little bit more discreet and insidious. And this is why we have gathered the support from the Vietnamese, the Chinese, sometimes the Japanese communities to raise as one voice. And then we would be able to present ourselves as another community fighting against racism as a whole.
And so we just talk about this because the Asian population is the third biggest group in France, after the European group of immigrants and then the people from Northern Africa, and then it's actually the Asian immigrants. But can you actually talk about an Asian community in France, or is it more separated according to what country people are coming from?
We can talk about communities in the case of the Vietnamese and the Chinese population, because the Chinese migrants or foreigners are quite numerous, and the Vietnamese people are from the old colonies, French colonies. This is why they have gained the right to migrate to France under some special conditions. And this is why we can feel their strong sense of community, and that they have managed to develop businesses around the 13th district, the 3rd district, and Belleville, like you said before.
The Asian community is one of the biggest minority groups in the country, yet we rarely hear talk about them in the news. It's pretty, the issues are pretty neglected by politicians as well. I mean, there are a lot of people from the Maghreb active in politics or literature or in culture, yet Asian people, we rarely see them. And nevertheless, there's a lot of racism as well, which is underreported in the media. How do you explain this, the fact that we rarely talk about Asian racism and very little about the Asian community in general?
First of all, I would maybe remind that the Asian population don't have the same feeling about participating into politics. So that's why maybe if they feel that racism is an issue, sometimes they don't really think that politics could be the good solution. And sometimes you can.
So is that a question of culture, or where does that idea come from then?
From migrants, from an economic issue, these people first want to succeed, make some success, or achieve something as businessmen. They try to make their own company, sometimes working in restaurants or clothes shops. But they want to become someone before having the right to speak about something. And sometimes when these populations stay as they were when they arrived here, poor, they don't really feel that they have the rights to speak aloud about this.
There was a big racist incident in Aubervilliers, which is in the north of Paris. There was a big demonstration as well, and it was basically one of the first times that the Asian population demonstrated. Could you tell us what happened in Aubervilliers?
I would like to mention that this is not the first time that the Asian communities demonstrated to ask for security, and we have not witnessed the scene. I have not witnessed the scene myself, but I know that a Frenchman from Chinese ancestry was attacked by someone in the streets asking for money, and there's a strong stereotype that the Asian people carry a lot of liquid, of cash money, and that's why they make quite good targets for among tourists. And the Japanese tourists are often complaining about this. So this is maybe a common history, but this time the violence was such that the Chinese man was killed, and once again the whole community rised to ask for more security. And this is somehow a paradox that the Chinese community asked for conservative parties in France to ensure their security.
And how did the government react to those demonstrations?
To me, the reaction from the government is, there are two types of reaction. There are the diplomatic reactions, and there are the local reactions. And in Paris, the local politician and the government politician are quite in a close tie. So I think the reaction was quite effective. But they might have taken this as a global problem, trying to make a good image of the country as a whole, but not trying to solve that issue on racism.
Do you think there is something changing in the French society, and that actually these issues are now being more, that we talk more about them, or is it still a status quo on these issues?
Many associations already fight against racism, and the same association which are criticized for maybe taking more seriously the African or the Arab communities are saying that we shouldn't be taking too much from the American model of multiculturalism, and they think that we should have a Republican way of dealing with that problem. And maybe if something is changing, that's the rise in politics of the Front National, the Nationalist Party, is making that we're not sure about which is the right way to fight against racism. We have this American influence, and we have what the French model have done so far, and I feel the change when I realized that people are trying to find a new way to fight against racism.
Thank you very much, Leo Takeuchi. You don't have a website yet, but we can follow you on Twitter.
You can also follow me on Twitter, and I have a blog on which I write article. It's www.francojaponais.wordpress.com.
Okay, francojaponais.wordpress.com. Well, thank you very much for this very interesting view on Asian racism, or racism on Asians in France, which unfortunately also exists. Thank you, Leo Takeuchi. Every episode we talk to you about a special French word or expression, and that's brought to you by Maud Descamps. Bonjour Maud.
Hi Stefan, hi everyone. This week I'd like to tell you about an expression we've heard a lot about François Fillon, candidate to the presidential election, who refuses to give up the election despite an investigation over fake job scandal. A lot of media in the past few days talked about François Fillon's baroude d'honneur, meaning François Fillon last stand as all his supports are quitting him. So, well, let's have a look at the etymology of the word baroude d'honneur. For once, the roots aren't Latin, but Arabic, and more specifically from the Berber dialect in the south of Morocco. The word baroud meant explosive powder, and the first expression, the expression was first used by militaries in the 20s to designate a battle. Today, the meaning of baroud is not only military but also political. Baroud d'honneur, the last battle you know you can't win, but you will engage anyway. And that's all for the French word of the week. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks very much, Maud Descamps. À la prochaine. Well, we already talked about this topic last year, but because
you're so much into
no,
it.
you are into it. But you are entitled to, because you're Swedish, and of course the best winner in the history of the Eurovision Song Festival still is ABBA until this very day. So yeah, France has its candidate for this year's Eurosong. Who is it?
Let's take a listen first.
Les étincelles deviennent des flammes, les petites filles deviennent des femmes. Ce que tu crois être la mort, c'est un brasier et rien de plus.
Yeah, this is a young singer. She's called Alma, but the title of the song, well, it maybe says a lot about the state of the country.
It's called Requiem.
Requiem, yeah. Well,
I don't know. Last year, for those who remember, it was a big year for France, because France actually ended up not sixth to last and not the last position, but actually sixth in the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah, it was a nice song, but this year's song, I don't know.
I have a hard time believing that this song is going to be a repeat of the success from last year. Well, of course, we'll have to see. But, what I find is always funny in France is how, I don't know how it works in the Netherlands. In Sweden, it's a big thing. The contests leading up to the big Eurovision Song Contest is actually you have a big Swedish selection, to say. So, and you have, I think it's 4 semi-finals before going to one final to select the Swedish contribution to the Eurovision Song Contest. This is followed by millions of Swedes. Yeah. They tour around the country. You hear the songs over and over. How is it done in France?
Yeah, well, nobody really talks about it.
Well, they just, they just select a person and say, like, well, now it's going to be this person.
Yeah, because they know that, well, they will probably never win. So yeah, it's
it's a culture. It's a culture clash, but it's a quite funny one. We'll see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, the final is on May 13th, and that's also the week in which France will have a new president. So maybe there will be a French winner of the Eurovision Song Festival and a new president. That would be nice. That wraps up this edition of So French. We hope you have enjoyed it. Please follow us on Twitter at SoFrenchNews. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please send us an email. Our address is sofrench@sofrench.news.
And please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in iTunes or in SoundCloud. And you can also find us on the TuneIn radio application. And please share the podcast with your friends. We will be back in 2 weeks.